And I want to put up a statement from the Representative Adam Smith from Washington saying, quote, "I condemn in the strongest term President's decision to order the U.S. military to strike Iran's nuclear sites. The President did not seek authorization from Congress or demonstrate that Iran posed immediate threats to the security of the United States." Let's be joined right now by the ranking member of the House Armed Services Committee, Representative Adam Smith. Thank you so much for joining us here on the Sunday. Fast-paced nature. Less than 24 hours ago, President Trump ordered those strikes against Iran. Can you talk about your reaction, and were you informed that this was coming less than 24 hours ago?
Yeah, no, we did not receive notification, which is somewhat unusual. And more unusual, the president did notify Republican leaders in the House and the Senate. So I think that partisan take on this is troubling. But the larger issue is what this means going forward. Iran will almost certainly strike back at U.S. interests. I think the president is hoping that they don't, but it's hard to imagine that they won't. And then what do we do next? So is this really going to wind up escalating the war throughout the region? Might it drag in other countries? If Iran attacks our military assets in Qatar or the UAE or Bahrain, then you've got even more nations involved in the conflict. And what would the president's response be to that? Number one. Number two, we don't yet know how much damage has been done to Iran's nuclear capability. And the president has made bold statements about that, but we don't have actually metrics, measurable things that say, here's what they had before, here's what they have now.
And I wanted to ask you about that because he said they obliterated them last night. Tonight, he says it was a monumental amount of damage, saying they were accurate. How long will that assessment take, and how rapidly do you want to hear what has actually happened on the ground in Iran?
My team tells me days, perhaps weeks, because it's hard to tell. Look, the words obliterate and monumental are not actually substantive words. Iran have, get with the numbers, where they had somewhere close to 20,000 centrifuges. A lot of them were at Fordo, some at Natanz. The ones at Fordo were buried deep. Yes, there's a massive amount of damage on the outside of the mountain at Fordo. But did we reach the centrifuges? How many of them did we damage? Might Iran have centrifuges elsewhere, and might they be able to rebuild them? They certainly can rebuild them. And then with regard to weapons-grade plutonium, that they've used the centrifuges to enrich the uranium to get to the point where it's weapons grade. They have enough 60% plus weapons grade plutonium by most estimates to build somewhere around 10 nuclear weapons. Well, did we get rid of all of it? Did we get rid of half of it? We need those sorts of specifics, and we don't have them yet, so we don't know.
And I do want to ask you, because as you heard from your statement, talking about you condemn in the strongest terms, but also the fact that the president failed to show some clear objectives for these actions. And I think a lot of people are talking about the war powers resolution. You notably have said it so yourself. And we've seen presidents in the past go around some of that. How concerning is that in your mind?
Yeah, well, let me be clear. I mean, President Trump really, other than the not notifying Congress at all and then doing so in a partisan way at the last minute, what he's done here is not unprecedented. Democratic and Republican presidents have acted without congressional authority in a variety of different ways in terms of using the military. But it is nonetheless troubling. The War Powers Resolution, the Constitution, give Congress more power than this. The president is not allowed, under the Constitution, to take these unilateral actions. And I think it's important that we follow the Constitution. So I'm troubled by that, but the more immediate concern is what comes next. How does Iran respond? How do we respond? What is the true nature of their nuclear and military capability after these strikes?
And we've seen other lawmakers like Republican Thomas Massie calling this unconstitutional, also talking about the War Powers Act. We heard from AOC Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, a fellow Democrat, saying it's absolutely and clearly grounds for impeachment, saying this is a grave violation of the Constitution. Do you think it warrants the level of an impeachment inquiry?
No. No, I don't. I don't think we should throw around impeachment that lightly. I mean, let's remember. I mean, Bill Clinton, did the war with Serbia over Kosovo. Congress didn't vote to approve that. In fact, we had a vote, and we rejected the vote, and the president went forward with it anyway. President Obama went into Libya. Now, he did cite the War Powers Resolution. There's all kinds of little nuances to what happened there. But presidents have pushed the envelope on this to assert greater control of the military, Republicans and Democrats alike. So, no, I don't think this is an impeachable offense. I think it is a problem that so much power is being concentrated in the hands of the executive. And of course, with President Trump, he's doing this in a wide range of other ways, using the U.S. military domestically, firing people, canceling programs that Congress has approved. So, I mean, he's gone outside of constitutional authority most of than other presidents. But in terms of using the military, this is not unprecedented.
All right, I just wanted to ask you about that. And of course, you also mentioned, as we watch and wait for Iran to retaliate, they have vowed to, as U.S. cities here in the United States, DHS Secretary Kristi Noem saying there is a heightened threat environment. Are you concerned about that, an attack potentially on home soil?
Yes, I mean, the most likely outcome is that Iran will use their missiles and their drones in the region, either directly their own or from some of their proxies, Shia militias that they have in Iraq and elsewhere, to attack U.S. troops in the region. We have a lot of bases throughout Iraq, UAE, Kuwait, Qatar, Bahrain. That's the most likely target. But we have certainly heard intel briefs before that Iran also could potentially carry out terrorist attacks on U.S. soil. We absolutely need the Homeland Security Department and the FBI to be ready for that. That's a possibility. Again, I don't think it's the most likely possibility, but it's certainly on the table.
And we were hearing different statements coming in, including from Vice President J.D. Vance about this, potentially sleeper cells here in the United States. But he also mentioned having no interest in boots on the ground there in the region in the Middle East. And we've seen that before, and we talked about the historical context of it. Are you concerned that as we go down this rat hole of retaliation, as the UN Secretary General said, that potentially could be in the future for the United States? How concerned are you about that?
Well, I am concerned. This is the way these things play out. And I've been in these conversations. I've been on the Armed Services Committee for 29 years. We've had a lot of conflicts in that time frame. And, some we've entered into, some we haven't. And there's always that. It's very enticing to say, well, gosh, we can just strike here. We can hit them quickly. We can accomplish our goals and then walk away. That's incredibly tempting. That's not the way it usually plays out. It usually expands. And then you're caught in the situation of, okay, they hit us back. Can we let them get away with that? Now, I would be very surprised if we ever got to the point where anyone was seriously talking about putting U.S. troops in Iran. That is untenable on a whole series of levels. But this could absolutely escalate in terms of Iran attacking our troops, us responding, them responding. And then how do you get out of that? Where do we get back to what President Trump promised us, which was his strength as a negotiator, his strength in using diplomacy to avoid this sort of conflict, to cut deals and get us out of wars, not into wars. That's what he said he was going to do. And he just kind of started a war with Iran, which is not what he promised he was going to be able to do for us. So I hope we can get back to diplomacy and negotiation.
And this is not black and white. If we're at war, we're not at war. But did this signal that we potentially are on that side of things, that we are at war?
We are right now. I mean, look, and I know they've come up with all kinds of euphemistic ways to describe this, but we just dropped a whole lot of ordnance, a lot of bombs on Iran. If Iran had dropped that many weapons on us, I think we would have said we're at war. So yes, we are at war until there is some resolution to this conflict because we just bombed another country. And I don't think we should engage in euphemistic, semantic dialogue here. We should admit what it is. Now, I hope that the president is right and I'm wrong, and that Iran wakes up and says, you got us, let's negotiate. We're not going to attack back. We can go forward. But I don't consider that to be a likely outcome.
And my last question about this, because you mentioned that there is hope out there, especially within the Trump administration, that talks will resume again, negotiations will continue. Did this not obliterate those trade negotiations, I should say?
They set them back, no question. I mean, beyond any shadow of a doubt, in addition, beyond just sort of the military aspect of this, Iran's kind of pissed off, as anyone would be, having been bombed like that, and probably less inclined to negotiate with the country that just bombed them. But on the other hand, Iran also has practical considerations. It is absolutely true that what Israel has done, and rightfully so, by the way, in defending itself, has significantly weakened Iran and significantly weakened Iranian proxies, Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthis. Maybe not as weakened. Assad is gone from Syria, a patron of Iran. Iran is in a much weaker position than they used to be. But just to pop up after the country's bombed you like this and capitulate, that's not the way human beings normally react to these things, and certainly not the way Iran normally reacts. So we'll see. I hope we can get back to diplomacy soon. But in the short term, it seems unlikely.
And hope we don't get into that dark cycle that we talked about retaliation. All right, Representative Congressman Adam Smith, thank you so much for joining us here on Live Now from Fox. I appreciate your time.
Well, thanks for the chance. Appreciate it.